Anyway, Acts 15. Okay, we looked at the paragraph markings, verse 1, 6, 12, 13, and 36. And we had the outline, the way, the why, the witness, the word, and the work. And we did the way is that Acts 15 is it's his great attempt to stop the work of the gospel. Wherever that is ongoing, there is a resistance to that. His greatest effort is making a pretzel out of it, just to distort it as far as the way is concerned. And the reason in this particular case, the why, and why the Jews were against it, and these are, we would assume that these were saved Jews, that were still hanging on the law, is because the Gentiles were being accepted by the Lord. And they were bringing it, and we looked at these verses in Acts 10, that call, not that which, he says, what does he say? He said, don't call that which is clean unclean. The Lord commands Peter. He said, but it's unclean. I haven't eaten this. He said, call not thou unclean which I have made clean. All right, so that was the why. And that is where we stopped. That's as far as we had gotten last week. Now, there's always resistance and so on. I plan for the afternoon today to preach on the shooting in Florida. I plan to preach on that in general terms. And what I really do believe the Bible we could apply it and present it this afternoon. I plan to do that. Verse 12 is our next paragraph marking. When all the multitude kept silence and gave audience to Barnabas and Paul, declaring what miracles and wonders God had wrought among the Gentiles by them. And this is the witness. When a missionary comes in and then he bears witness, there's depending on the presentation and the way it's done, some missionaries do not do this any longer, or if they've been on the field for a while, they don't do this. And what is one thing that they have bypassed it here, but people enjoy it, and I even if they don't have it, and I always call it the old-fashioned term, like when you were in grade school, is and kids like it, show and tell. And that wasn't the word I use. I call it what kind of a strip? No, a strip, a film strip. I call it, they're going to show, without even thinking, they're going to show their slides, their film strip. What do they call it today?
They're multimedia presentation.
Oh, wow, that's even more advanced. Multimedia, PowerPoint. Is there any other word for it? PowerPoint, multimedia presentation, film strip, or slide presentation. And so they do. They sometimes have a tape that they run instead of making their own comments. They have their own personal tape, and they show that. And so there's a break in the action. Before they preach, they might do the PowerPoint first, but it does give witness. And so this is kind of like the film strip or the PowerPoint presentation as to what God is doing amongst them. And it was a break in the action, and they gave ear to that. And I would assume it must have been interesting. It says they kept silence, right? They were interested. And back then, if you didn't have this visual thing, they would have given close attention to that. It was something that was different to witness. Acts 11. Go there, Acts 11. verses 1 through 18. Listen, if you're good, these principles, you can apply them, and they do write books about this, and they could present this in class. If you're in Bible school, in business, it's how to make a sale. The idea is these guys want to make the sale. They're making the pitch. And so they use various ways to get the hook out there to get you to do the accepting of whatever it is that they're trying to sell here. Chapter 11, verses 1 through 11. And the apostles and brethren that were in Judæa heard that the Gentiles had also received the word. And when Peter was come up to Jerusalem, they that were of the circumcision contended with them. Now, they had contended right away. And he does his witness or presentation, but it says here in verse 4, Peter rehearsed the matter from the beginning and expounded it in order unto them, saying. So he expounds upon it, tells the situation, exactly what had happened, how he had seen the vision, how God can, and Jews are into that, into the vision. They want to see something like that. Now I know that in the circle we were in the Baptist we were in, when I say that circle, the Bible believers circle that we were in, they would accept if Jews got the CH word, if they got charismatic, they would accept that and say, not that we experienced it personally, and the church didn't experience it personally, but the pastor would say that he would accept that because if it were Jewish people, because that's what they cling to, these visions, etc. That they want to see something. That these, what do you call? Oh, Messianic Jews. Sometimes they would have a vision. They would discuss that openly. Acts 14, verse 27, when they were come, they gathered the church together and they rehearsed all that God had done and how he had opened the door of faith unto the Gentiles. They told this story. And they kept silence for it. At the end of the day, what does a little child like to hear and they'll keep silence for? And they might insist on having it every day.
Ice cream.
No, not ice cream. Well, that is a good thing,
Stories.
A story. Yeah, they want a story to be told to them at the end of the day, and they're going to keep quiet for it, and they may not go to bed unless they have that story. And you can make connections with your children that way when they're really, really young. Now, if they can't understand English or understand words, what difference does it make? Oh, well, what's one advantage with a story? If you tell the story, if there's bright, especially children's books, there's bright colors and pictures, and you can show them the pictures. Another thing that isn't, I would even say you could do it with a baby, and would be edifying to you. What else could you read to the baby before you put him to bed? Pardon? Read the Bible. You could read the Bible to them. So it's edifying not only for the parent, but they look forward to hearing your voice and hearing a story. And you could do that. So anyway, they give this witness, they rehearse it. Deuteronomy 17, verse 6. If you would turn back there. This is in the law, and this is mainly for condemning people. You know, this kid that did this shooting, he had this pretty well planned out. I did not, I was busy. Oh, it happened on Friday?
Wednesday.
Oh, it happened, I'm sorry, it happened Wednesday. And I don't know what I was doing. I didn't, in the middle of the day, he knew enough to pull he had this planned out so that he was going to get those kids in the hallway. I mean, he wasn't exactly dumb. And then escape. The fact that he escaped Somebody said he went to Walmart and he got a Coke at McDonald's. You know, he had this pretty well planned out to the point where I thought, well, there's a defense attorney. I mean, no one's denying this. He's not denying this. In fact, he's confessing to it. And the defense attorney has been, I heard a statement from her. She's a public defendant that was assigned to him. If she is sympathetic, not that they're not going to try to give him the chair, but is sympathetic to it. But if he had escaped like that, and they said he had a gas mask on. Now I know there's cameras everywhere, and it'd be really tough to, if there were no cameras and no one recognized. Now I know that was his school. They could argue the fact that what witnesses were there. They said somebody said he had a gas mask on. Is that true?
I heard something about it, but I don't know where or when.
In other words, he had a disguise on.
Yeah.
And then if he shed the disguise and he exits with the rest of the kids, there could be a case where you wouldn't be able to finger him. Yes.
I think it's more amazing that they were able to catch this kid.
And they were able to catch him.
In 20 minutes when they didn't even know who, like, kind of like makes me think that they knew, like, nobody knew who it was, and then he's eating down and then he's caught. It didn't make any sense to me.
Well, Timothy McVeigh, it still amazes me they caught him. That they caught Timothy McVeigh. That I think he wanted to be caught. It's still, you know, we're not there, and I'm preaching on it. You may not, I'm going to preach on it this afternoon, yes.
I heard that the FBI had 2 tips against him.
Oh, I know, yeah. The whole
But he
thing
had a
is just
disguise.
bizarre.
He had a disguise, so how did you know in an hour?
Well, the point here was the witness. At the mouth, as far as the law is concerned, verse 6, Deuteronomy 17, verse 6, at the mouth of 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses shall he that is worthy of death be put to death, but at the mouth of 1 witness he shall not be put to death. Now, obviously that's for the death penalty. But here is at the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses to establish what the truth is. So you got Barnabas, you got Paul witnessing, you have Peter witnessing, and now the next verse you're going to have James witnessing. And I believe our next point after the witness is the word. He's using the witness of the word in there. Now, Matthew, Deuteronomy, since we're there, 19:15, this would be in the law, 19. 1 witness shall not rise up against a man for any iniquity or for any sin, in any sin that he sinneth. To me, that would really be hard to judge. When I hear that some of you have been on a jury, and then the way that the evidence is presented, and they have to argue, and if there's not a substantial amount of witness against it, it would make it really tough for the jurors to come to a conclusion. What is the right decision? I would have a hard time, my own conscience, either to condemn or to free. It would be tough. I've never sat on that. Or if it's a 3-panel judge doing that, or if only a single judge. I mean, they have to make these judgments. And you know, God is a righteous judge, for he seeth the heart. And he knows everything. But there is this witness. 2 Corinthians, turn there, 13, verse 1. So I'm going to preach about this afternoon. And when we were at Bible Believers, one thing would be brought up as far as demonic activity. And listen, us that are older, do we remember any of this stuff going on? Did it go on and we were just oblivious to it? Did it go on and we were oblivious, or it wasn't on the news?
What, school shootings?
No, there's no social media.
Social media.
A what? Oh, you mean devils? You mean? Yeah, that's called well, Yeah, it's a demonic activity. Are you sure it's pronounced that way?
Well, he said coven, I said coven, I don't know.
I've heard it pronounced coven.
It's common.
A coven. Well, we had a witch in here, and she had a coven. And she had gotten saved. She rode with not the Hells Angels, but she rode with some gang. And she had a coven. And she claimed to be a witch. And she had gotten saved. And they would come, and you knew her husband. Everybody here, I don't think there's maybe a couple exceptions that didn't know her, that all knew her husband. He's been in here. And I think both of them are dead now. I'm pretty sure. Pardon?
I don't know about her.
You don't know about her. But she moved to, but they met under the Cloverleaf Bridge. Well, there were signs down here at the park, down here at the waterfall, and they say that at the bridge over here where the rail line is over here, that there's signs over there. And then according to, I can't think of the guy's name, that this is the third highest ranking place in the United States. Northeast Ohio is this would be about the Y2K era. I can't think of the guy's name. He was really, was real popular. No, and this is the third highest rated place in the country for demonic activity. No. This would be somebody on the radio. I can't think of his name. Anyway, 13:1.
Bob Larson?
That's it. Is it Bob Larson?
Probably.
Is he on? Yeah, that's the guy.
I used to listen to him.
Yeah, Bob Larson. He would be on. Was he on?
12:20.
He was on 12:20. He was not on the one over there on Bartlett or Barrow Road. I can't think of it. Wasn't
WHK.
He was on AM. I'm thinking of the FM station.
Yeah.
That's Barber.
CRF, Barlow.
No, they wouldn't touch that.
Right. They wouldn't touch that.
They only broadcast what Chicago tells them to broadcast.
Okay, this is the third time I'm coming in. The mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses shall every word be established. Here, it's not as far as condemning a person, but to establish facts or truth. Matthew 18, 16, the ascension. I remember it was Sam Gipp brought it up. How many times is the ascension mentioned? I'm pretty sure it's the ascension. Anybody know? I'm only going to state without doing research. How many times is the ascension mentioned in the Bible? That's a good guess. I believe it's 4 times. 4 times. I'm pretty sure. If you go to the end of Luke in the New Bibles, it is removed. I'm pretty sure. So that then makes it 3 times. And then he said, if you just remove it one or two more times, it no longer becomes a doctrine. The ascension. In other words, monkeying with the Bible in these new Bibles can change what we would consider hard, fast doctrine, and it no longer becomes a doctrine. It's in there, but you can say it's not at the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, meaning the Word of God witnessing, and no longer becomes a doctrinal fact. Verse 16. Again, it states the same thing, and I have these cross-references in my Bible, Matthew 18, verse 16. But if you will not hear thee, then take with thee 1 or 2 more, that in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word may be established. This is somebody who's caught in some kind of a sin or a dispute between a couple of people, and they're going to go one-on-one, then they take a witness, and so on, and then eventually it's brought before the church. All right, the devil attempts to use witnesses against Christ. The devil does that. So he brings in, but they are called false witnesses. Matthew 26. Matthew 26. verses 59 through 60. Now, I don't know what's going to happen to these FBI agents. They're calling for resignations and firings from the 7th floor. You know, the higher echelons, those that are running it. So who knows? I don't know what's going to happen. Just be thankful we're not involved in it, you know. Verses 59 through 60. Now the chief priests, elders, and all the council sought false witness against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. Yea, though many false witnesses came, yet found they none. At the last came 2, but notice they are false witnesses. They're false witnesses. Matthew 14. So they did attempt to stay with the law, but they did not bring true witnesses. They brought false witnesses. So getting back to what I didn't mean to change the subject. My thought wandered. Is the shootings and you know, Charles Manson. That was pretty gruesome. I'm trying to think of where they brought guns in and did that. I mean, they brought ambulances into Bedford, but there were no shootings. And you say underneath the cloverleaf there was demonic activity. I guess the Elliot Ness days, I mean, gangsters did that to each other, but what about children? I remember we did work for juvenile court, for juvie. And the, what do you call the prison down there?
Detention?
The detention center. We did work for it. And we would go in there. We would supply a signage, and we would go in there. And I personally did not go in there. Now, I've been in where they house them, where they're chained, where they're in shackles, and when they come out, they're shuffling, and they're all shackled up, folks. And that is in the Bible, by the way. And so we'll look at that. And they're all shackled up, and I would tell the kids, I said, here, you see this? You don't want to end up here. And because we were seeing a psychologist, and I said, see this? This is what I'm attempting to keep you from. But when you're in there, they make the place childproof. The screws can only go in one way. Now, I don't know how they get them out. You can't jack them out. No mattresses. Everything is so it's destructive proof. That they make it so that you cannot get... What do they call that when you bring in something that you can kill somebody? What do they call that?
Sure.
No, there's a contraband? Is that what it...
Yeah, it's part of contraband. You know,
Contraband. I mean, the general
anything
term
restricted, yeah.
is they make it so that you cannot hurt somebody, or they do what they can to keep that to a minimum. Because they will. Listen, we had a child psychiatric center right around the corner from us. Not the adult, we had the children's. I mean, it's sad. It's sad. Now, when we say children, how old is it?
18 and under?
Yeah, when we think of children, we think of a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old, which includes that, but it goes up to young adults. We're talking 18 years old and under. Now, that's all been bulldozed. It's gone.
Yeah, when you're legally 18, you're adult, so anything under 18 would be a child legally.
And I know that they have opened up these, because of lack of money, they've opened up these facilities, and a lot of these people have hit the streets. And that's why homelessness is way on the rise. They have no place to go. Really makes it really, really tough. And so there's a call to maybe house these people, you know, get them off the streets. It really, really makes it hard. All right, so he attempts to use witnesses against Christ. The devil does that, Matthew 26 and Matthew 14. Yet Barnabas and Paul's witness agreed with each other. If we look at 56 and 55 and 6, if we look there, and the chief priests and all the council sought for witnesses against Jesus to put him to death, and found none. For many bear false witness against him, but their witness agreed not together. So none of the witnesses, they couldn't find two to agree ahead of time. By the way, when you witness now in Hollywood, sometimes they do this in a movie and sometimes they forego that. When there was a trial and there was actual witnessing taking place and witnesses were to be called, where were the witnesses? They are somewhere else.
Outside.
No, not sequester. No, that's something to keep the jury from speaking.
Outside the courtroom.
They're outside the courtroom. Is that what you call it? Cloistered? Is that what you said?
They're in the testimony, so they can't cooperate.
They don't want that to be to collaborate or corroborate the testimony. If they hear the testimony, well, then their testimony is going to change to match the other person's testimony. Now, you would think that these guys, you get ahead of the game, and we always say that, with what goes on, is these guys are going to get ahead of the game and try to get their story straight before we're going in there. Or the attorney coaches them on what to say, what not to say. There's a lot of coaching ahead of time. If your attorney's in there, if your attorney's not in there. But they don't want those witnesses to line up with each other so that each witness is going to tell the true side of the story of what they believe. And it may not be true. It could be something that's false or made up, but they could find two that agreed with each other. So in what they do, so this is, you could say this is all patterned after the Bible and the law. They don't want the witnesses to make up false witness that agree with each other. The witnesses didn't even agree with each other. But you could say, well, this was this came up sudden, right? They arrested him at night. They called the Sanhedrin together quickly, and they didn't have time to get the ducks in a row. They didn't have time to get their ducks in a row. And so they couldn't get the witnesses to agree with each other. Verses 13 through 35, back if you would to Acts 15. And after they held their peace, verse 13, James answered, saying, Men and brethren, hearken unto me. Simon had declared how God at first did visit the Gentiles and take out of them a people for his name. So he's using the word. So when the missionary comes in, there could be an introduction. He generally shows the film strip first, the show and tell first. After the show and tell, what does he do? He entertains what? He entertains questions. We open it up for questions and answers. Where do your children go to school? How are they adjusting to the culture? Are they learning the language? How are you learning it? It's opened up to all various kind of questions that people feel at liberty to ask. Then what happens after the question and answering is over? What takes place? As a general rule, the missionary does what?
Preach.
He preaches. And we hope that he's preaching from what?
The King James Bible.
From the King James Bible. From the Word. So after the show and tell, they had direct witnessing. They had told the story ahead of time, and to add credence to it, they had these witnesses. They had the show and tell. And then after that, then came the preaching. And it wasn't the same person. This was James now. And he preaches and uses the Word of God as testimony and giving witness that the Gentiles also were to be saved. In verses 15 through 18, after this I will return, build again the tabernacle. He's going back and he is using the Word of God. In here in my center column, it's Amos 9:11. He's quoting the Bible, and he's using that as the witness. All right? As the Lord used the Word to defeat the devil, so should we, right? Did not the devil, the Lord use the devil the Word of God to defeat the devil. And what verse what book did he quote from? All 3 times he used what book? This should be old to us. Deuteronomy. All 3 quotes are from Deuteronomy. The devil uses the Bible. And what verse does he quote? Where does he quote it from? What book of the Bible? He quotes it from Psalms. He misquotes it, misapplies it, but in other words, the devil does it. People do it all the time. One preacher says I can make the Bible mean whatever I want. Right? He maketh me to lie. Psalm 23. Down beside the still. Right? Now, those are jokes. He maketh me to lie. Right? Beside the still waters. But beside the still. Right? And so now that is just an over-embellishment. But you see how you could do a lot of twisting and turning going on around here. And make it mean a lot of different things. So the word, he uses the word. Acts 15. I don't feel led to run through that. The idea is that is what he is using to persuade men. We thus persuade men. So persuasion needs to go on. Now I know that in some sermons, in some circles, they start with a verse. And I do read sermons like this, and they don't interest me. I look for other things, cute sayings and phrases. I'll look through that. They'll start on a verse. They quote the verse, and then from the beginning to the end of the sermon, they quote not one more verse to substantiate or to justify their argument. They don't do that. They just do a lot of blabbing. There's a lot of blabbing in there. Now there's others. And I have one guy in particular, I can't think of his name right now, but I swear every sentence is quoting the Bible. Every sentence. And so in my sermons, now I may have a half a dozen in this sermon right now. I told the wife, man, I said I didn't look up the reference or mark the reference down. I kind of quoted it, but I didn't. I like to put the reference down in the margins. If you read not the abridged version, but the actual book by the guy that was in prison in the 1600s, John Bunyan. You read John Bunyan, and you have the original book, unabridged, unaltered, and with the King's English on the side margins. What's on the side margins? Anybody read it? No. Anybody know what's on the side margins? All the references are given to justify what he just said. And he has that on throughout there. Now, if you get an abridged version, all that could be missing. Not only are the words changed to so-called modernize it, folks, you're smart enough to understand the original. You're smart enough to know what it means. But all that's been knocked out of there. But when I read some of these old sermons, they're quoting the Bible. They're just quoting it. The word, all right, the works, verses 36 through 39. And some days after, Paul said unto Barnabas. Now this kind of wraps up or concludes was that the end of the actual first outline? Yes, verse 36 on. I have it verse 36 through 39. The work, in other words, they are now Barnabas and Saul. Paul says to Barnabas, let's go and see how the churches are doing and see how the work is going. Let's see. Let us go again and visit our brethren in every city where we have preached the word of the Lord and see how they do. So the work, Satan's desire is that the work of God not go on and not go forward. So he doesn't want that to go forward. Let's go and see how the work is going and see how the churches are doing. And so what does he say? If Satan was really behind that, now we could say, well, it was their own flesh, fallen flesh, because Paul and Barnabas had a disagreement there over John Mark. Could it have been, there is the world, the flesh, and the devil. Could their own flesh have gotten involved there? Or could it have been that the devil come along and said, hey, listen, buddy, and the devil intervened. He doesn't want the work to go on. So what does he want to have happen? He wants Barnabas and Saul to have a good knockdown fight. Right? Knockdown, drag out, argument. And they do. So he does the work. He doesn't want to go forward. So it doesn't say that Satan intervened there. It doesn't say who had intervened. It could have been that we don't have to. One thing we don't want to do is give Satan credit where Satan might say, "Wow, I got credit for that, and I didn't even show up." Right? Satan doesn't have to show up. We got our own rotten flesh to deal with, right? Where we don't have to go too far. Just look in the mirror for the problems, right? All right, now, going back and starting over as we rehearsed the entire chapter. If you go back to verse 1 now, and we'll look at each verse now. Going back, wherever God's work is progressing, Satan is present to oppose it. Now listen, what is the new billboard? What is the heading? Now, we did not change the color combination. There was confusion there. Let's see. We bumped it up. We're going to see how it goes this week. Oh, what is the heading? The verse of the week. Now, I wanted it to be black background with white copy. Well, they made the whole thing black background and kept it red-white. But they bumped it up. So let's see if we can see. If we can't see it within a week, we're going to change the entire background to different backgrounds and make it black-white for the ribbon that's above that. What is one way to not have the work go? How would the devil intervene there? We can have, I'm okay with the verse of the week, the devil says. Since the guy's going to put it up there, we'll have the verse of the week. But the verse of the week, we wonder, when is this week ending? If the week was this week and next week and the following week, it turns into the verse of the what? Of the month. And if we still have, let sleeping dogs lie, it goes from verse of the month to verse of the 6 months. And it never gets changed. I mean, that's what the devil would have happen. Is let's just keep the pastor busy, sleeping, occupied doing something else, getting no help, whatever. Any way that he can slow it down, retard it, hamper it, any way he can do that. And as people drive by, and if they can read it, it says verse of the week, if people are paying attention, they realize, well, hey, what's going on there? It's not verse of the week, it's verse of the month. Right? It never got changed. So whatever God's work is progressing, Satan is present to oppose it. He wants it to be opposed. And being the father of lies, he works through lies. And certain men which came down from Judæa taught the brethren and said, except you be circumcised after the manner of Moses, you cannot be saved. Is that the truth or a lie? That is a lie. Now the verse we use, John 8:44. All right, he is the father. Ye are of your father, the devil, and he is a liar from the beginning and the father of it. That's the quote. If we were to quote 8:44, he is the father of lies. Oh, brother, could you turn that backlight switch on? I forgot. We were supposed to turn that on when service. We never turned that. Let's see what it's like. Come on, turn it on. Let there be light. All right, so it's better. Now, those are supposed to stay on for the 2 hours. We can turn them off later. How does that work on your camera? Does that work better?
It's a miracle.
Is it a miracle? Really?
It can actually see you.
Really? Well,
Stains
good.
on your collar.
Oh, and the sun came out just now, too. That helped. Yeah. I'll tell you, when that sun comes out, it really sheds light. The number one lie of religion, is we must work in order to be saved. That's the number one lie. Unless you be circumcised after the manner of Moses, you cannot be saved. All right, so how many works or things in the law are there? 1, 10, 100, 1,000? Now let's say there's 1,000 or 3,000. Is it the 10 Commandments? I would say, well, people say, well, you got to obey the commandments. Well, can you name them? And the one guy, he got halfway through or a third of the way through, and I said, well, you're basing eternity. He literally laughed out loud. And I said, you're basing your eternal destiny on a law that you can't name. And he said, you're right. It gets him to thinking. Now, did I lead him to the Lord? I didn't. But I planted some good seeds there for somebody else to come along and maybe when he was ready to go further. Yes, well, which one is the one that saves? Well, in their mind, it's circumcision. Right? But if that one didn't save, maybe it was the other command. Which command is it? And then who decides which command it is that does get you there? Of do, what we must do. Acts 16:30. What is in Acts 16? It's the story of who? Anybody know? The Philippian jailer. And what does he say? What must I do to be saved? So that is inherent in man. When the rich man comes to Jesus and he's sincere and he wants to get to heaven, Jesus said, "Well, give all your money away and keep the commandments." Right? And he said, "I have kept all these from my youth up," but he didn't want to give up the dough. I've kept all this from my youth up. You see, he was doing, and that's got to be, let's say, Mark chapter 10, verse 17. Without going there, that's got to be that story, Mark 10. And does it appear in the other synoptic gospels? The rich young ruler, he's called in another, comes to Jesus. He wants to keep these commandments, and he names off a few. He names off a few of the commandments. In John chapter 6, what is going on in John chapter 6? There's the feeding of the 5,000. We'll end here. They take a boat ride. They go on the other side and they want to make Jesus a bread king. And then the Pharisees come in and approach him about eating his flesh, right? That you've got to eat of the bread of life. I am the bread of life. And what does he say? They said, well, what good works must we do in order to be saved? What work? He said, believe on me. If you want to do the work of God, what this is, and he says, this is the work of God. John 6, verses 28 and 29. This is the work of God, that you believe on him that he hath sent. Believe on me, on Jesus. That is the work of God. Is only believe. That's what we are to do. Only believe. It's not based on works. It's based on faith. Based on faith. All right? He's just satisfying. They want to work. You want to do a work? Well, this is the work. You want to get there? Well, just believe. Believe. That's it. So the number one lie of religion is that one must work in order to be saved. And Jesus basically says there is no work needed. Who did the work? He did. Jesus did the work when he died on the cross for you and I. All right, and we will begin this, if you look at verse 11 of the same chapter. But we believe that through the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ, we shall be saved even as they. All right? By grace. All right? And we'll pick this up right here next week. We'll start there. Father, bless now the preaching. And Lord, the nourishment that it gives us and the challenge, Father. In Christ's name, amen. All right, preaching in 15.